There was work that needed to be done. And so early in the morning, that first day of the week, three women, Mary of Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the wife of James, gathered together the spices they had prepared, and they made their way to the tomb. In the midst of grieving for the one they deeply loved, one they followed, who had just died quite a violent death. My sense is they're on autopilot. Think about when you perhaps have lost a loved one. What do? We stay busy, want to keep our minds occupied, we collapse from just exhaustion. We try to look for some little closure. And the reason I say that is because twofold. It would be highly unusual for faithful Jews to touch a body that has been buried now. And secondly, the question, who's going to move the stone aside? Because they have sealed that tomb. Like I said, working on autopilot. Luke says when the women arrive, they show no surprise that the stone's been moved. They then proceed to walk into the tomb, a little surprised, but we're not sure because of what they see or what they don't see. But then two men in dazzling robes appear to them, and now we hear Luke say they're terrified and they cower on the ground. And one of them simply asks the question, "Why do you look for the living one among the dead? He's not here. He's been raised just as he said he would be." And with those words, these memories were recreated within the women. So much so that they left the tomb, they went back to the other 11 to bring them the news of what they just experienced. There was work to be done. Early on the morning of that first day of the week, none of the men were to be found. Just seeing if you're with me, I guess you're not, so okay. That was a joke, folks. They were there. In fact, they were locked behind a closed door. And when the women appear to them, what happens? They just sort of wipe them off, throw them off, brush them aside. That's just nonsense, what you're saying. And so what happened from there, except for Simon Peter, he then ran to the tomb. Now, he's a little older guy, getting there, a little huffing and puffing. And when he gets there, we hear he looks inside, is amazed, and walks away, and we never know what happens next. What does he do? This morning, for my Easter homily, I'd simply like to look at some of those scenes and how they apply to us today, who are faithful, who experience and have believed in the resurrection. Being on autopilot. Yes, my friends, there are moments when we are on autopilot. We are numb. We do that probably sometimes to protect ourselves. What's going on in my life? What's going on in the church? What's going on in the world? We do it to keep at a little distance. Perhaps not to have our hearts hurt again. Maybe it is the heaviness of the sickness of a relative. Perhaps it is chemo. Maybe someone has died. Maybe it's just tough decisions. But we sort of keep at a distance. We certainly are facing the sins of our church. Maybe sometimes the only way is to have a protection of the heart. The sins of the world, just this morning, 158 killed, explosions, terrorist attack in Sri Lanka, while they were worshiping, 500 injured. It's like, how do I keep it at a distance? Well, sometimes there's a rock protecting my heart. And yet, what was the theme of our Lent as a parish here? We ask God to take from us our stony hearts and to give us a new, fleshy, life-filled heart. How'd that go for you this Lent? You okay? But the idea of letting our hearts down again, letting the stone move aside so that we could touch our heart and be aware of what's going on. And then what happened for the women? They entered into the tomb. And the tomb, for all it represents, our brokenness, our dyings, our surrenders, being vulnerable, being chaos, even death itself. But in the entering of that, they really enter into the heart of God. Because in that tomb, they realize that God's love is greater than anything they can imagine. It's even greater than the power of death. And so it is for us. We too are invited into that tomb and to experience in the heart of God this Paschal mystery, to experience the cross, the tomb, and new life. The women hear a voice of another, and it triggers these memories within them, memories that enliven them, memories that remind them of God's faithfulness and gives them hope. You and I are called to do the same thing, whether it be our words and our prayers that we offer for one another. Are you, am I ready and willing to do that? To hear words that trigger within others reminders of God's faithfulness and how God will sustain us. Also, they were sent on mission. They were called to action. They were sent to the other 11. And when they got there sharing a message they were pretty excited about, they were not well received, as I said. They were brushed off by the 11. What happens when you and I want to share a message of what God is doing in our life, and it might not be received? What do? The women just remain persistent in sharing the story. On the other hand, are there times when you and I dismiss other people because of who they are, what they look like, what they sound like? We know things about them, and so we like nonsense. And finally, there's Simon Peter. Runs there, walks away amazed, but we don't know what happens. I think part of our calling as an Easter people is that we are called to share our faith with others. Now we know that Simon Peter does do that. But that willingness to bring what we experience of God's love to others. We just can't keep it to ourselves. So this afternoon, if there's an Easter egg hunt, bring it there. Tomorrow when you return to work, or you return to school, in the marketplace, wherever it might be, that's where you and I are being sent to bring and share this experience of God's love. In a few moments, we are going to renew our baptismal promises. And more than a rejection of sin and a profession of faith, they are promises that say we are willing to live in the heart of God. That we are willing to be immersed in the Paschal mystery of dyings and risings. It also says that we are willing to be witnesses, to give testimony of our experiences of God's love. And the better news about it is we don't do it alone. We do it in the sense of a community. That's why these promises are done with one another. Street language today, it's a reminder, I got your back, you got my back. So that we may be witnesses to others. So in a few moments, when we say I do, and when we're sprinkled with water, that's what we're saying I do too. To being those witnesses for the world today. A world that experiences certainly the cross of Christ.